I found out my husband was sleeping with my sister on a Tuesday, which felt insulting in itself. Betrayal should at least have the decency to happen on a dramatic day. It was his phone, left face up on the kitchen counter while he showered. I wasn't looking for anything. I was reaching for his charger. But a text from Claire Pilates lit up the screen, and Claire doesn't do Pilates. Claire does Pilates with me on Thursdays, and this text had come in on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m., and it said, "Last night was the best mistake I've made in years." Same time next week, I want to tell you, I dropped the phone. I want to tell you I screamed or cried or threw something. I didn't. I stood very still in my kitchen, in the house we'd bought together 4 years ago. And I felt something in my chest go quiet and cold, like a light switching off in a room I'd never go back into. My name is Mara. I was 34 years old, and I had just realized that my husband, Dean, and my younger sister, Claire, had been building an entire second life underneath mine. I didn't confront him that day. That was the first decision I made, and it was the most important one. Because the moment you confront someone, you hand them the chance to explain, to cry, to reshape the story into something survivable. I didn't want survivable. I wanted the truth, all of it, before either of them knew I was looking. So I became a detective in my own marriage. Over the next 3 weeks, I learned the shape of the thing I was living inside. Dean and Claire had started sometime around my father's funeral, 8 months earlier. Grief, apparently, being an excellent lubricant for betrayal. They met at a hotel near her office every Tuesday. Claire had covered for herself by joining a fake Pilates class. Dean had covered for himself by working late, a phrase I'd accepted without question for the better part of a year, because why would I question it? I trusted him. I trusted her more. She was my baby sister. I had walked her down the aisle at her own wedding 2 years earlier when our father was too sick to do it. And Dean had been my plus one, standing beside me, and somewhere between the ceremony and the reception, apparently, something had started. I found hotel receipts in a shared credit card app neither of them knew I still had access to, from an account opened years ago that was technically still in my name. I found a second phone, cheap and prepaid, tucked in the wheel well of Dean's car. The kind of phone you only need if you have something to hide. I read 4 months of messages on that phone in one sitting in a Target parking lot, with my hands shaking so badly I had to prop the phone against the steering wheel. Here's what nobody tells you about finding out you've been betrayed by two people at once. The grief comes in layers. First, you grieve the marriage. Then, a few days later, when you're not expecting it, you grieve the sister, the real one, the one who used to call you crying about a bad breakup, the one whose kids call you Aunt Mara Bear. You realize you're not just losing a husband, you're losing an entire wing of your life. And the people who did it are the two people you trusted to protect it. I didn't want to just leave. Leaving felt like letting them win the version of events where I quietly disappeared and they got to keep being the tragic, misunderstood couple who fell in love against the odds. I wanted them to lose something. Not violently, I want to be clear about that. I never once thought about hurting either of them physically. What I wanted was for the truth to cost them exactly what it had cost me: reputation, comfort, the good opinion of people who mattered to them. So I planned. Claire's wedding anniversary, her marriage to a genuinely decent man named Robert, was 6 weeks away. She'd asked me, months earlier, before any of this, to give the maid of honor toast at their vow renewal party, a sentimental, we made it 2 years kind of celebration with about 80 guests, including my parents' entire extended family, Dean's parents, and Robert's whole family, who adored Claire and had no idea what she was. I said yes. I kept saying yes. I smiled at family dinners. I let Dean rest his hand on my back in front of people. I let Claire hug me a beat too long and whisper that she loved me. Every one of those moments cost me something internally, a kind of controlled private bleeding, but I told myself it was tuition. I was paying for what came next. I spent those 6 weeks building a case, not a scene. I gathered screenshots, time-stamped receipts, a hotel loyalty statement Dean had foolishly linked to an email I still had partial access to from when we'd shared a family plan years ago. I wasn't going to fabricate a single thing. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough on its own. My only job was to present it at maximum volume, to the maximum number of people who mattered to them, at the exact moment they felt safest. The night of the party, I wore green, Claire's favorite color, because she'd asked the bridal party to. I hugged Robert's mother, I complimented the caterer, I watched Dean laugh with his father by the bar and felt nothing but a strange, clean calm. The calm of someone who has already grieved and is now simply finishing a task. When it was time for the toast, I stood, glass in hand, and the room quieted the way rooms do for maid of honor toasts. Warm, expectant, ready to be moved. I started the way you'd expect. I talked about Claire as a little girl, about how she used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms. I talked about how proud I was to be her sister. People were smiling. My mother was already tearing up. And then I said, Robert, you deserve to know the truth about the last 8 months because I think everyone in this room deserves that, actually. I know I did. I didn't yell. I didn't call anyone names. I read calmly from note cards, the timestamps of the hotel visits. I mentioned the second phone. I said Claire's name and Dean's name in the same sentence, in front of both of their families, in front of my own parents, in front of Robert, whose face I will remember for the rest of my life. Not because it broke, but because I watched in real time the exact moment he stopped loving the version of his wife he'd built his world around. I didn't finish with a flourish. I simply said, I loved you both. I'm sorry you didn't think I deserved the truth instead of this performance. Set my glass down on the table and walked out to my car, where I sat for 11 minutes before I could make myself drive. I won't pretend what followed was clean or satisfying in the way revenge is in movies. Claire's marriage ended within the year. Dean and I divorced. The fallout with his own family was, from what I heard secondhand, brutal and lasting. His mother, in particular, never forgave him. I didn't get a triumphant montage. I got a lot of silence, a lot of family members choosing sides, a lot of nights alone in a new, smaller apartment, wondering if I'd done the right thing or just the satisfying one. But here's what I knew. Sitting in that car in the parking lot, I hadn't lied. I hadn't invented a single detail. I had simply refused to let them keep their comfort while I carried the cost alone. And 2 years later, rebuilding a life that was smaller but entirely, finally mine, I understood something I hadn't at the time. The point was never really to destroy them. The point was that I stopped protecting people who had never once protected me. That's the story. Betrayal doesn't always end in a scream or a slammed door. Sometimes it ends quietly, over cocktail hour, with a woman in a green dress reading from note cards, giving everyone in the room exactly the truth they deserved.